With that, breaking right now, British media is now reporting that Prime Minister Boris Johnson has agreed to resign. That, according to Sky News and the BBC. We're expecting him to make a statement at any moment.
Former Brexit Party leader Nigel Farage joins us now. Nigel, good morning. It's great to have you on this breaking news. What is your reaction to it? British Prime Minister Boris Johnson saying that he is going to resign.
He had no choice. Literally, he had no choice. Despite getting a big mandate from the people in 2019, the truth of it is he hasn't stuck to the rules. And there is one fundamental rule between leaders and their electorates, and that is to tell the truth, even if the truth at times isn't very nice, isn't very palatable. And I'm afraid what's done for Boris Johnson is again and again, over and over, being found out just not telling the truth. And when he's caught saying, I'm sorry, I forgot. And that has led to a catastrophic collapse in public trust. And around him, all the officials that make up government, all the different ministers, whether they're in education or health or whatever it is, over 50 of them have resigned. It's quite extraordinary. In the last 48 hours, he literally didn't have enough people left with trust in him to carry on in government, so he's gone. And my conclusion is that it's actually a very sad end for something that started, really in a very glittering way. Brexit was the big moment in British history. And all right, I started it, but he picked it up. He ran with it. He won a general election. He delivered it. There's more work to do, but he delivered it. And that should be his historical legacy. Sadly, with this announcement that's to come in the next few minutes, he goes out looking like a prime minister who was dishonest with the British people, and that is very sad.
Nigel, you mentioned that the government could not continue because there were not enough ministers. Nevertheless, Boris Johnson, up until the last couple of hours, had been insistent he was not going to go. He was going to remain in office, and he'd have to be dragged from office kicking and screaming. What changed?
Yes, I mean, there was a quote overnight in the Sun newspaper, our big tabloid, that, you'll have to dip your hands in blood to get rid of me, which I thought was a horrible analogy. What changed? It's difficult to say. Did he have a conversation with the Queen? Did somebody in his family come to him? I think in the end what happened was that a number of senior cabinet ministers just said to him, look, unless you're gone today, we're going to walk out, and the country literally would not have been governed at any level. And frankly, the last 24 hours, it's been farcical. It's been sort of almost like a sort of psychodrama that's been going on in Westminster. I mean, the truth is, he should have gone 48 hours ago. It would have been cleaner. It would have been easier. But if you haven't got the men and women around you to run the country, you simply have to go.
So, Nigel, what happens now? Will he stay as prime minister until they choose a new leader? And if so, who is that going to be?
Two big questions there. The first is what he's going to say in a few minutes is that he'll stay as prime minister until late September, early October, to give the Conservative Party the opportunity to have a process to choose a new leader of the party and therefore a new prime minister. However, many of those 50 resignations in their letter have cast doubt upon Johnson's integrity, upon his truthfulness, upon his fitness to serve in public office. And it's going to be very difficult to know whether he can stay on as prime minister for a few more months or whether they actually ask him to go and appoint his deputy, who's a man named Dominic Raab, who would step in as an interim. I don't know the answer to that right now. He will want to stay on as prime minister, but if all those around you say you're not a person of trust and integrity, that's going to be very difficult. In terms of who replaces him, there is no obvious front runner. And the reason for that is that Johnson, for all his faults, is also a big, strong, charismatic, humorous, at times very entertaining character. And there's nobody obvious like that. I think what's going to happen now is there's going to be a battle for the soul of conservatism in this country. And I'll tell you why. Johnson was elected as a conservative, but governed as a liberal. Massive commitments to net zero, raising taxes, increasing the size of the state. I mean, to many traditional conservatives, he was unrecognisable as a conservative. And so now you will have that wing of the Conservative Party, who were effectively, middle-of-the-road Social Democrats, against more traditional Conservatives. And that's where the battle's going to be. I just don't know. All I do know is if I look across the Western world, whether it's America, Britain, Australia, wherever we go, when conservative parties stop being conservative, guess what? They lose elections. So I think this is a big moment for British conservatism. There's going to be a furious battle of ideas over the next few months. But actually, right now, I'm viewing this as a good opportunity. We got Brexit. That'll be Boris's legacy as Prime Minister. Now's the chance to move on, to find a form of conservatism that fits in the 21st century, that suits men and women, self-employed, those running their own small businesses. We have got to get growth back in the UK economy, or we're going to be sunk with the rest of Europe. And I hope we're going to have that debate and come out with a positive answer. So I'm not downhearted. You know, I think this chapter is over, a new one begins, but the party's got this real battle for its soul to fight.
You mentioned Johnson's transition from a conservative to basically a liberal. And as somebody watching from the U.S., it seems like that transition happened in and around the time that Joe Biden ascended to the presidency here in the United States, which begs the question, what does this mean for U.S.-UK relations going forward in the near term?
I mean, US-UK relations took a massive backward step when Biden became president, because Biden is not particularly fond of the United Kingdom. You know, he's got this sort of romantic idea about Ireland, and that makes it difficult. We've made no progress on a trade deal, which under Trump we would have signed and sealed and delivered by now. And then, of course, we had the Afghanistan debacle, where, you know, Biden withdraws American troops without even consulting his oldest ally. You know, we're smaller than you, but pro rata, we put the same money into Afghanistan. We lost the same number of lives in Afghanistan on a pro rata basis, working hand in glove with the Americans, and Biden walks away and doesn't even consult us. I think there has been a slight coming together over Ukraine, where perhaps Johnson's given more leadership than Biden in many ways. But yes, where Biden and Boris bonded was at the G7 in the west of England in Cornwall last year, because they both want to save the world by aiming for net zero. So that's where that relationship went. I mean, the truth of it is, guys, presidents come and go, prime ministers come and go. The US-UK relationship has very good periods and slightly cooler periods. Overall, I still think our countries are incredibly close, and they will go on being so.
Nigel, you know, for those who are just learning about the fact that there was even controversy surrounding Boris Johnson, can you explain exactly what it is that did him in, for lack of a better phrase?
Yeah. Well, there were a series of problems that have been occurring month after month, unforced errors in most cases, things that could easily have been avoided, as opposed to major crises that sometimes get thrust upon leaders. This one is a good old-fashioned sex scandal. And I promise you, no one does sex scandals like the British. We're very, very good at it. And this one is about a man who was in a senior position in government, who had a long history of behaving inappropriately, and I mean very inappropriately, towards young men. And there was an incident that took place at a club in London, a conservative club in London, where the guy got very, very drunk. Basically assaulted two young men. He was ultimately suspended from the party. And then the question came, did Boris Johnson know about the history of this man? And that's where this all started. No, he knew nothing about it. Then we were told, well, he knew generally there was some gossip, but he knew no specific allegations. And then it emerged, no, the Prime Minister had been directly briefed on specific allegations of serious sexual impropriety against this man, but hadn't acted and hadn't removed him from post. And when Johnson was confronted with that, he said he'd forgotten. So you can see this spin of lies that just completely got out of control. And with it, confidence in the country and the Prime Minister just collapsed. You know, I said earlier at the start of this, the great thing about leaders is sometimes they have to say things to their country that aren't very nice, but you have to tell the truth.
Yeah, speaking of truth, Nigel, there was also, he was dishonest to the public about hosting these government parties in office buildings during pandemic lockdowns, and he actually survived a vote of no confidence over that situation. And I always thought it was interesting how serious the British people took that, because we had about 50 leaders in the United States to basically do the exact same thing. But there was a lot of anger towards Boris Johnson over the rules for thee, not for me thing.
Do you know, if he'd said we were working in a very serious health pandemic, we were working 18 hours a day, all the hours God sends. We were under huge pressure. And do you know what? Actually, on Friday nights, we did have a party. There was alcohol. There was a bit of fun. But that's what people working under pressure do. Do you know what we'd have said? All of us would have said, well, actually, we broke the rules a little bit too. But it was, again, so often we find in politics and in public life, it isn't the act itself that causes the harm. It's the attempt to cover it up by not telling the truth. And so we've had a series of these things with Johnson where his honesty, truthfulness and integrity have been questioned. But literally over this sex scandal, he has been caught bang to rights, not telling us the truth. And we've just decided collectively and quickly in the space of a few days, enough is enough.
10 minutes till the top of the hour here. Quick reset. British media, I should say, saying Prime Minister Boris Johnson expected to resign. We're going to have an announcement at some point within the next couple minutes, potentially hours from right there, 10 Downing Street. We have Nigel Farage here with us to break down what this means for the UK, for UK-US relations. Boris, Nigel, excuse me. You have different hair than Boris. I want to get into the appetite for scandal between our two countries with our leaders. Obviously, US, no stranger to scandals with our leaders. Now, you obviously facing a major series of scandals there with Boris Johnson in the UK. How does the appetite from the public differ, and what does that lead to going forward with what these leaders can ultimately accomplish and their political futures?
I think the one thing to remember is that the British press, and in particular the British newspapers, are much more vicious than anything you've got in America. I mean, I know as somebody who's lived in the front lines just what the British media is like. So, I mean, literally, there are many, many things in people's private lives that get exposed in Britain and get talked about, okay? But the truth is, people are quite forgiving because, let he who is without sin cast the first stone. Nobody lives a blameless and faultless life. But it is about how people respond. And this can be, financial allegations or personal allegations or whatever it may be. It's all about how people respond to it. And sometimes people try and hide under a rock and hope it all goes away. And maybe it will and maybe it won't. But it's those who willfully try to cover their tracks with untruths that in the end get found out. And it's interesting, we can go back to 1963 when there was a government minister, the Minister for War, who was involved with a woman who was a prostitute, who was also involved with a Russian attaché. Can you imagine this, the height of the Cold War? And he lied to Parliament. And in the end, it brought the entirety of the Conservative government down, and Labour won the next general election. You see, one little lie can get magnified in a huge way. And unless the Conservative Party can learn a very rapid, quick lesson from this, they will be obliterated in the next general election.
Nigel, has there ever been a British Prime Minister to resign in this way? How historic is this moment?
Actually, you see, you elect a president for a term, and they can be impeached and removed, but it doesn't really happen. Our system is different. We don't actually vote. In theory, we vote for a number of MPs, and the Prime Minister comes from amongst that body of MPs. Interestingly, resignations have become very common. So David Cameron resigned the morning after the Brexit referendum. Theresa May resigned the day after the European elections of 2019, when the Conservatives got the lowest vote in the entirety of their history, and now Boris. So we've now got 3 prime ministers in a row that have resigned. So it's actually becoming rather common over here.
Nigel, what's Theresa May thinking this morning?
I don't know. I mean, she has appeared, I must say, very bitter and twisted. She probably feels a certain degree of delight because she has got a huge antipathy towards Boris Johnson. So she probably does, in a private, little, quiet way, think that. But here's the point, and I'm going to re-emphasize it one last time. What has been under threat for the last couple of days isn't just the legacy and reputation of Boris Johnson. It is the entirety of the Conservative movement in this country. It has been dragged through the mud over the course of the last week. People in the streets openly saying the Conservatives, they're all cheats, they're all liars, they're all sex abusers. I mean, it's bad. This is bad. So whatever she may think privately, the fact is the Conservative tribe needs to get back together, reassess its core values, get back to being a party of truth and integrity, and only if it does that will it have a chance at the next election. Otherwise, we're going to finish up, and all right, it's not Jeremy Corbyn, it's not the extreme anti-Semitic hard left, but we'll finish up with a liberal, socialist style administration, which I think would do us great economic harm. So, it really is up to the Conservative movement now. It's got to get this right.
Well, we were just citing that British media was reporting that Boris Johnson is set to resign today. We have independently just confirmed that news as well. And I also have another question for you, Nigel. Does his resignation mean, and just more of a clarification on a point that you just made, does this resignation mean that the next British Prime Minister could be from the Liberal Party, or is the next British Prime Minister going to be from the Conservative Party? How does that work?
OK, not in the short term. In the short term, the Conservatives have a big parliamentary majority, right? They've got many, many more MPs than the other MPs added up together. So we will maintain a Conservative Prime Minister. We may even have an interim Prime Minister until a new permanent successor is chosen. The argument I'm making is that the next general election has to take place before the end of 2024. And on current form, the Conservatives would suffer a devastating loss in that election. We would get a liberal socialist grouping and Prime Minister. There is still time for the Conservative movement to save itself, but it has to act quickly and it has to act decisively, because that whole brand has been tarnished. I'm afraid, and it's sad to say, but the whole brand has been tarnished by Johnson's dishonesty.
I know you said earlier in our discussion you weren't sure what names would be circulating, but that said, we here in the U.S. are discussing potential blasts from the past with a look ahead to 2024 and beyond. Obviously, I'm referring to Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump. Any blasts from the past we could see there in the U.K.?
No, and I mean, even the fact that Hillary's name is being mentioned is quite beyond my comprehension. No, there is no chance of Theresa May coming back. There is no chance of David Cameron coming back. No, it's going to be someone new. We will see. I personally hope that it's somebody who's outside the very narrow circle. I mean, think about this. Both David Cameron and Boris Johnson were both at the same school. It's called Eton. They produced 21 British prime ministers. I mean, can we go on with one school producing most of our prime ministers? Or is it time to move outside the upper classes and to find those who perhaps have been successful in the world of business before? I'll give you one name to look at, all right? I'm not saying he'll win, but I'll give you one name to look at that could be interesting. His name is Nadim Zahawi. His parents fled from Saddam Hussein when he was about 11, came to Britain, didn't even speak the language, has become a very successful, quite wealthy businessman. He was, until a few minutes ago, the Chancellor of the Exchequer, the #2 job in the country. And I wonder whether somebody who's come from outside, who's self-made, who's not part of that upper-class British set, I wonder whether someone like that is perhaps what the Conservative movement needs.
Nigel, what does this mean for the war in Ukraine? Johnson has been a major supporter and a major backer of sending aid, British aid, to Ukraine. Does that change now that he's going to resign?
I don't think it will, to be honest with you. It seems that Ukraine was one issue that did unite the government in a quite remarkable way. And no, I think the British are going to go on sending arms, sending aid to Ukraine, although I don't think they're facing up to the reality, which is it does very much look like Putin will take Donbass, and no one's quite thought about what to do next.
Breaking right now, it is 5 o'clock in the East and 10 a.m. in London when you're looking live at 10 Downing Street, where Prime Minister Boris Johnson is preparing to resign. You're watching Fox and Friends First on this Thursday morning. I'm Carly Shimkus.
And I'm Todd Pyro. We are expecting him to make a statement at any moment. Johnson's most recent scandal coming after his newly appointed education secretary resigned just 36 hours after starting in that position. The education secretary, one of more than 50 British officials to resign after it was revealed Johnson knew about misconduct allegations against the former deputy chief whip he appointed in February. Nigel Farage, former Brexit Party leader, here with us during this breaking news. Nigel, you and I and Carly have been talking for the last 20 minutes or so about all things Boris Johnson. For those just waking up at 5 a.m. here on the East Coast, why now? What happened over the course of the last 24 to 36 hours that Boris Johnson, who originally said he was entrenched, he wasn't going anywhere, you would have to remove him with blood on your hands, is the analogy that he used. What changed recently that's leading him to resign?
A catastrophic loss of confidence in the country amongst those who voted Conservative back in the election of 2019 and amongst those who make up the government, the officials, the ministers, those who run the country, then resigning en masse to a point where he literally did not have enough men and women willing to take jobs to keep the country running. I've never seen anything like it. I've seen people's reputations fall and people's reputations rise in short periods of time. So these really are huge, momentous events. And it's the old story of the straw that broke the camel's back. You know, there've been a series of upsets with Johnson, not telling the truth over the Downing Street parties, whilst the rest of us couldn't go and visit our grandmothers. Many, many times where what he said has been found just simply not to be true. But in the end, it was over these allegations, serious allegations of sexual impropriety, and us discovering that he did know the truth about this individual, that he didn't act, and then try to lie to cover it up. And that has just led, and people just said enough's enough. Enough is enough. This is it. We cannot go on with it. So it's happened incredibly quickly, for him, for his historical legacy. It's not good at all. For the Conservative movement, well, at the moment, it's very bad indeed.
And now the question turns to, will he stay until late September or early October, or will he resign right away? And that is something that he is going to announce most likely when he releases his statement that we are waiting for, that could come out any minute now. What do you think he is going to decide?
I suspect that he will try to stay on as Prime Minister until September, but given that most of the people who resigned have questioned his integrity, his truthfulness, his honesty. I mean, these are very serious charges. I mean, think about it. Your own team are saying you do not have the integrity to lead this country. Given that, if he does try and stay on, then we could see more days of battles where people then urge him to go immediately and to appoint an interim Prime Minister, who would probably be Dominic Raab, who is his deputy. So this isn't over. I mean, look, he's going, he will be gone, but exactly how this plays out, we've yet to find out.
For the American audience that is watching this morning, what does this mean for the future of the relationship between your country and ours?
Truth of it is that Boris Johnson had kind of bonded with Joe Biden over climate policies, over CO2 emissions. The upset over Afghanistan had partially been mended because of Ukraine, although we're no nearer a trade deal. Look, I think the truth of it is that when Trump was in office, the relationship between the two countries was probably the best and the closest it had been for some years. And it's not been quite the same under Joe Biden. But I think whoever replaces Boris Johnson will undoubtedly be pro-American in instinct. And it's worth remembering, you know, despite the big changes in the world, But the USA is still the biggest foreign investor in Britain, and Britain is still the biggest foreign investor in America. So you think about that, you think about NATO, you think about intelligence sharing, you think about the fact that we all listen to the same music, watch the same films. I mean, you realise that our countries are incredibly close, and they will go on being so.
Nigel, thank you so much for joining us on this breaking news. British Prime Minister Boris Johnson just said that he is going to resign. We are expecting a statement to come from him any moment now. Your perspective on this topic is invaluable. We appreciate you as always.
Thanks so much, Nigel.
Thank you.